Welcome to the Black Sparrow Media Internet Broadcast Network.
You are listening to Linux in the Ham Shack. LHS is a podcast about Linux, open source, and amateur radio, for everyone. Now here are your hosts, Cheryl, W5MOO, Russ, K5TUX, and Bill, NE4RD.
Well, hello everybody and welcome. You have tuned into the most terrific amateur radio podcast on the internet. This is Linux in the Ham Shack, and this is episode number 567. 567, a beautiful number for the first episode of 2025. Woo-woo! Yes. Yeah, all the fanfare, all the things that and the buttons I would push if I had them to do so. But we start off the year with a deep dive, and we'll see how quickly we can go off the rails for the first episode of 2025. But before we get into our topic for tonight, we'll introduce ourselves. For the on assignment, Cheryl, W5MOO. I'm Russ, K5TUX.
And I'm Bill, NE4RD.
All right. And Bill's already into his cups. I'm working on mine, quite literally into my cups.
Yes, we're starting the year right. You know, the inauguration is tomorrow, so we're getting prepared.
That's right. Yeah, the world might be a very different place after tomorrow. We'll see. But this show is not about that. This is about Linux and open source and technology and ham radio and all kinds of things along those lines. And luckily for me, I was prepared to talk about one thing to a certain point, and then Bill jumped in and said he could talk eloquently and thoroughly about another topic. We didn't actually say that. He said we can talk about it.
Yeah.
But if you've been listening to technology and Linux and open source related podcasts lately, there has been a kerfuffle a-brewing in the world of WordPress. And a kerfuffle in WordPress is going to be widespread and have sweeping implications because WordPress is running probably like, what is it, 60-something% of all the blogs and websites on the web at this point.
Yeah. I mean, WordPress, is always the go-to to make it easy to get, pretty much idiots to add content to your web page. Yeah. Yeah,
pretty much. And it's also imminently hackable. So, so with all of that in mind, there's stuff afoot in the organization over there at WordPress, which is causing a lot of people to rethink using WordPress, looking for alternative avenues to host their websites and whatnot. And to that end, there's a project that we're going to talk about tonight, or actually Bill is going to talk about tonight, and I'm going to ask questions about. It's called Jekyll, and Bill has already made the move to Jekyll, at least in part. So he has some actual hands-on knowledge of this topic. So I'm going to hand the reins over to him and let him steer this horse right off the ravine. So
we're just going to go right over the crest of the hill, and there's no bottom. Anyway, yeah. So the move from a PHP and database backed CMS, which a lot of people go for WordPress, and we're not going to get into the details specifically of what the problems are with WordPress right now and what the current controversies are. But there's ownership issues with like WordPress.org and Automatic and all the people involved in the various plugin and distribution and everything support. So it kind of made me start thinking about why I shouldn't be using it in my workflow at all anymore. And I had a fortunate case that my shared hosting system with some really crummy old WordPress applications ended up getting hacked somewhat. So I torched it all, burnt, scorched earth and all that stuff. and decided it was time to go to a static site generator. And the one I picked, I started looking through all of them. I mean, if you go and look for static site generators, you'll probably find 5,000 different blog posts or fake AI posts about like what's the top 5 and everything else. And, I looked at the two that I kind of settled on looking on in full detail was Jekyll, one, because I was familiar with Jekyll being sort of the auto magic way to get your GitHub pages kind of set up using a static site generator for your page on GitHub. Like, that GitHub has like the github.io pages, and you can have one free with your account, and you can easily set that up with Jekyll. So I kind of played with that a long time ago when I learned that. And then the other one I was looking at was Hugo, which I think is pretty popular as well. Jekyll is Ruby-based, at least for, the binary and stuff like that. And I think Hugo is actually Go-based. So those are the two that I particularly looked at. And I ended up settling back on Jekyll. And it was primarily just because of the usage seemed a bit cleaner. And so let's just kind of go over real quick what Jekyll is. Jekyll is a static site generator. It takes text. This is from their website. It takes text written in your favorite markup language and uses layouts to create a static website. You can tweak the site's look and feel, URLs, and data displayed on the page, and more. I mean, that sounds all grand and stuff like that, but it is a little bit of a step into a different world. Basically, to get everything installed, let's start with the simple stuff first. Jekyll does require you having Ruby and Ruby gems, and probably your compiler and stuff like that. So GCC and Make. If you have all that stuff installed via your repository or Flatpak or what have you, Brew, maybe even still, you can do a gem install Jekyll bundler. And what this will give you is everything you need to run your static site generator with Jekyll. And when you create your very first site, you'll create it with the new command line that you have. You have a Jekyll executable now, and you'll do a Jekyll new and then whatever you want to call your site. And then you change your directory into that site, and then you can quickly do bundle exec Jekyll serve. And that'll go ahead and prompt up, spin up your server, and then you can start viewing the local host at port 4000, and you'll see like the boilerplate that they have there inside of Jekyll. And I'm going to talk really quickly first about my initial problems with both Hugo and Jekyll, because I kind of always think about the lazy way of making a website, because I hate doing website code. I hate CSS. I hate front end development. I hate all that stuff. But that's probably just me. I started looking at themes. And the more I dug into themes, the more I thought it complicates my understanding of how the web page and how the website is actually put together, because the themes bring along an entire ecosystem of their own set of code, like a DSM or something like that, that's very specific, domain language to that theme. And in the end, I decided to not even get into using themes. So guess what we won't be talking about? Using themes. I think it's a mistake. I think it's a huge mistake to even get into using a theme. I think it breaks your fundamental process of building a website. There's plenty of boilerplate code out there to get various things working, whether it be a Material UI, a Bootstrap UI, Tailwind, CSS. I guess a lot of people use that. I haven't used Tailwind, but I hear really good things about it. But there's things you can bring in that you do not need to do any special installation task. And all you need to do is create a couple of files in your setup to start displaying stuff, and it'll all be good. And I'm going to go into my project here so I can look at actual files, because I am going to mess it up completely if I don't. Let's see, Jekyll sites. So I set up myself a little Jekyll sites directory in my projects here. And the first site I did was my wife's site because she was yelling at me that her website died when we had the said hacking thing event occur, and I shut her site down in the process of it. So in the site, when it creates it, you're going to end up with some directories and some basic setups. Now, the Jekyll is set up to do out of the box quickly, stuff like RSS feeds, blog posts, and stuff like that. That's very nice because it's all in Markdown. So you can do all of your posts and all of your pages and everything else in a Markdown language. It is, a little bit of a, it's the same, but it's different as well. Because there are some things that you put inside of the file that would suggest more configuration stuff, like you can actually have layouts set up in your particular file that you create, your title, your date, categories, anything you can imagine, you can actually configure inside of each page that you create. But I think I'm getting off the rails already. It's there's so much stuff in here. So let's just say in a basic site, you kind of want, think about what you would template in a basic site. You would have sort of some default markup that would be your base template for your web page. So I have one that's a default, and the default has some basic stuff in it, like it's a doc type HTML, and the HTML is in English, and it has a body, and that's it. And then it imports stuff like similar stuff that you would see inside of a theme anyway. So let's say, if you're familiar with WordPress themes, you have, custom content, you have a header, you have a footer, you have maybe some navigation and stuff like that. This can all work exactly the same way. The nice part about this is once you have your templates built, and your templates can also have code in it, and this is where it gets a little bit more interesting, is that you can, with your static site generator, also have data files that can generate pages based upon your code. So you can have actual YML files, that's the data file, or a CSV, if you want a CSV file, if you're more familiar with that. You can actually write code to look at a data file and loop through it, and it can either make elements in a page with looping, or it can make hyperlinked pages, so endpoints, an actual URL endpoints, based upon the data that you have in the file, based upon the rows, like records and stuff like that. So think about how you would have done stuff in a database. And you can now do in a simple file, YML, CSV, and you could, have it checked in via GitHub. So you have tracking on it. And you have that dynamic capability of, I need to add a different page, or I need to add a different record. So in my wife's case, I added a different book. She has, my wife's an author, and she writes lots of books, and so in her particular books database, or books YML file, I have established dynamically, meaning I set the schema up of what was the name of the book, what was the ISBN, what was the description, and where's the link. And in some cases, what's the category, what's the image of the book, if they have an image that can be grabbed. And for that big book list, I have an entire let's see, I'm looking for my page, my template for books. There it is. So I have a book template that basically will loop through every title in the file of books and then plop those into the template based upon my, which I used, like I said, Bootstrap. I used Bootstrap and I used Boot Swatch for selecting a theme. Now, her website is not fancy by any means, and I will share it right now because it's preciousmckenzie.com, PRECIOUSMCKENZIE.com, and you can see how lame my websites are. But one thing you'll notice is that it's highly performant on a shared host. And all the images are from the actual source, not the author, but the publisher's website. So we were able to pull that in quickly, and I literally built the site in a couple hours, just kind of going through, finding all the links and everything else, and kind of setting up how I wanted the data to be. And I found it quite easy. Again, I have an entire. So in order to build the website, I have some basic HTML in my underscore layouts directory. One of those being default.html, which is the one I was talking about earlier. And then I have a home page, which basically is, show the content. Home.html. I have a page.html, which is the basic template for any page, and a post.html, which is a template if there was actually a post. She doesn't do blog posts yet, so we're not doing any of that. Includes, that's where I have my header and my footer. I have the footer, which has some social media links and some basic text for the website. In the header, the head.html, I have the actual links to pull in the style sheets from Bootswatch and Bootstrap icons, and to pull in the Bootstrap min as well. So we have Bootstrap in there. In the header, that's where we have the nav stuff. So the nav is dynamically generated as well. So it'll pull from the actual pages that you've added to the system. And some socials and stuff like that. So when you want a page in your website, in the root of your website, you would actually just create a new file, something.markdown. And in that something.markdown, you would have some information at the very top with some 3 dashes, and then you'd have a layout, which layout you would be using, layout : the layout name, the title : the title name of the page, and then you'd have a permalink : and then give it a permalink. And that permalink sets up the actual URL for everything there. And so in my case, I had a books.markdown file, and this is the one I was trying to find earlier, a books.markdown file, which uses the layout of a page, so it knows it's going to be a web page. And I have a simple just little loop here. I have a simple little table that I'm doing columns, and I'm dropping cards in columns. Because you have that in Bootstrap. It has a dynamic column thing that says, I only have 2 columns, but there's a dynamic list of columns that I'm going to give you, and you please fit it in my 2-column wide web page. I have some code here that is pretty simple. It's for book in site.data.books.titles. So it's looping through all of the titles that I have, which the titles is the key in the actual YML file that we were talking about earlier, the books.yml. And then I have the little boilerplate code here that sets up the divs and everything else. And then I have, has a simple little, similar to Jinja code, if you're familiar with that for your templating language. So you have a little bracket, and then you can type in whatever you want. But I have like book.link and book.publisher and book.data and book.name and book.description and book.date. So stuff like that you can all put in there, and book.image. So I can build images for the cards and stuff like that. And then, at the end you have an end for, because you're doing a for loop. So it's really cool. It's kind of like semi reminiscent of like coding and like PHP almost inside of this. except for the fact that once you render it, which if you have the bundle, Jekyll bundle exec serve, it's constantly building the website. So it's watching all your changes as you're going along, and it builds everything in your underscore site directory in the project. So when you're done, all you have to do is take that underscore site directory, shove that all up to the server, and that's it. That's all you need. All the stuff has been plopped in there. If you've created assets, it copies those into that directory, and that becomes your actual website that gets deployed. And it's kind of interesting because you can see your mistakes instantly, and you can test everything out. I'm working on right now a much larger site where we're doing basically 13 years of content have to be pushed back into the site, and it was done on Dreamweaver before, and then it's got 2 or 3 years on WordPress. So it's not something I can straight import. And I want to come up anyway with a nomenclature to actually build out the data sets and everything else for it. But over on the Jekyll site, which is the jekylrb.com, the RB is for Ruby, you can find numerous documentation and stuff like that. If you're wanting to import something from your old, or as they say, your old and busted site or your blog, and you want to use it with Jekyll, some of the importers that they have in the system are for systems that are run under Behance, Blogger, CSV, .clear, Drupal 6, Drupal 7, Drupal 8, EasyBlog, Enki, Ghost, Google Reader, Joomla, Joomla 3, JML, Marley, Medium, Mephisto, Movable Type, Pebble, Plu, XML, Posterous, Roller, RSS, S9Y, S9Y Database, Text Pattern, Third Party, Tumblr, Typo, WordPress, and WordPress.com. So they do have some built-in importers there. You can check out import.jekylrb.com, and you can find all the documentation on those. I'm sure that those come with a lot of a lot of errata and notes that, you're probably depending upon how customized your site is and how weird it is set up, it will attempt to do the best job that it can to replicate your site. If you're really concerned about SEO and stuff like that, then you want to make sure that you've preserved links and stuff like that. In most cases, I'm not too concerned about that because the links were probably bad to begin with. So, let's see what else is there. I'm just going to kind of go through some of the stuff. So it has a generic directory structure. The documents go over this quite well, where you're going to put stuff in it. It doesn't make a underscore data directory for all your data files. You have to make one because it assumes that you want a basic site and stuff like that. The templating engine is considered the liquid templating language. So this is where you have, are those brackets? I don't know what you call those. I can't remember what those are called. Brackets. What is that called?
I don't know.
Curly braces. They're curly braces. Okay.
Yeah.
So it's where you have your variables inside of double curly braces, and you have commands inside of curly braces and parentheses. Or no, percent signs. Curly braces, percent sign, command. So like if statement or for statement would be inside of a curly braces and a percent sign. Your variables will live inside of a double curly braces. And they have a bunch of filters and tags and stuff like that. So if you're trying to make things like an absolute URL or something like that, there's probably already a filter for it. If you're doing some tags, there's definitely a nomenclature for doing that, like line numbers and everything else. Permalinks, obviously those are important. You can do dynamic permalinks as well, where you'd have variables as your permalink. So that's very cool because you can get really creative in creating permalinks. I thought about doing my wife's books as permalinks for each book as well. I just didn't get to that point of doing that, but I could create a permalink for each book and then create additional information that would be, smushed into, the description or whatever the meta for the header. And so there would be additional SEO for it. but I didn't really get into that. You can do tons of static files. So if you're doing images, there's image handling for all of that stuff. Collections. Let's see, what is collections? Blah 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 blah. Let's see. That's not very interesting. I use data files for that. So collection seems like another way to do data files, which would be a collection as well. There's tons of plugins out there. There's a big plugin ecosystem for Jekyll. So you can definitely look into additional plugins. I have none except for, I think I added the SEO plugin because I needed it for something. I can't remember. But there is additional considerations when you get into that. My suggestion, again, is the less you put onto it, the less you have dependencies when you do upgrades to have to deal with. So that's kind of why I didn't want to install, local versions of Bootstrap and Bootswatch. I'm pulling them straight from the CDN with the pinned version numbers. I didn't want to maintain a node project underneath, or a node packages list, and then have to either go in and do a yarn build or what have you to build the resources for that. Yes, I know that's like not the perfect way to do it, but if you pin the version, that's pretty safe for software inventory reasons. Deployment is pretty easy to do manually, is what I did with my wife's site, because I'm going up to DreamHost, and I don't have it plugged into GitHub yet. But you can set it up to do from GitHub Actions, Travis CI, Circle CI, Buddy, RazorOp CI/CD, and probably many other things to do deployment automatically from this. Let's see, anything else? Upgrades. I'm using the latest, so I haven't had to deal with any upgrading, but there are issues, obviously, when you run from a version 3 site to a 4 site and a 2 site from a 3 site. So again, the more simple you make your site and the less complications that you have with plugins and third-party things and very high customization things, the better you're going to be. The nice part about this is you don't really have to know Ruby too much, because there is no Ruby in any of the files. It's all Markdown or YAML or CSV. So I think the barrier to entry is super low. And again, from somebody who hates doing front-end development, I found it almost easy between using, kind of looking at what somebody made with a Bootstrap theme with some basic stuff, to get the main divs kind of set up right, so like the layout's proper, and then just going on the Bootstrap and the Bootswatch site and looking at the example code and just copy and pasting and then altering and stuff like that. I found it quite easy to kind of get into that level of development. Again, I hate front end development. I hate websites. So I do it for work, but I hate it with a passion. So I try to make other people in my team do the front end stuff just because, me. Anything else I can see on here? You want to start with some questions? Because I'm kind of running out of some stuff. There are some content management systems you can plug into this as well. They have things listed on their website. If you look at their resources tab, they have like Cloud Cannon, Contentful, and Tina CMS. I think these would all still be GitHub based or Git based. So like, I don't think people are going to be logging into your site and adding content. That's not really how it works. So if your requirement is the fact that you need people to log in and add content, this might not work for you. If you can train them to send you a CSV file with your updated contents of something, and you just grab the record and throw into your data file when they have a new thing to put in there, that might be an option. Blog posts can be Markdown. So if they send you a Markdown of a blog post, you can add the header items quite quickly and then plop it into the site and hit publish, or execute your GitHub action. They have some e-commerce stuff, form stuff, search stuff. There's a lot of plugins and stuff like that for this. So it's definitely something to kind of look at the entire ecosystem. But I looked at it just from a basic, I had a really basic WordPress site that was not in a good state, and then WordPress itself not being in a good state. That's why I changed mine. So yeah, let's go ahead and start doing some questions before I continue to ramble.
Yeah, no problem. I don't have that many questions. The first thing that comes to mind though is this is kind of a different paradigm than WordPress, because WordPress is a content management system and this is a static site generator. So if your WordPress site is basically just serving static pages or static posts, you probably will have no real barrier to entry to switching to this. But if your WordPress site uses a lot of plugins and forms and does emails and generates RSS, I know that I looked through the plugin list for Jekyll and it's extensive. So obviously they thought of all of this, and you can, you can definitely make the migration. But a lot of people get into WordPress just because there's very little foreknowledge you need to set up a site with WordPress and do some pretty powerful stuff. So from what you've seen, what kind of expertise, or like, is this going to be difficult for someone who's set up a WordPress site with a bunch of plugins and fancy features to move over? Or are they going to have to really learn something and learn a new paradigm as well as new coding? Because even in WordPress, you're not really working in Markdown and stuff like that. So
yeah, I mean, some plugins so like right now I'm looking at a calendar thing. So on my current WordPress site that I'm trying to replace right now, we have, the events plugin, which gives you like sort of dynamic calendaring, an ICS feed for the, so people can plug in their personal calendars to it. That's a bit of a stretch. So I'm looking at some other options for that, whether I'm going to use like Google Calendar, and then there's some, templates to pull Google Calendar information in and out of there. I would say some stuff is a bit harder. They do have forms plugins for doing forms, so I think those are probably pretty easy. There's a lot of forms options. So if you're using like Gravity Forms or WP Forms or something like that, there's a lot of options for that. And I almost think a lot of people have gone away from those too, just because A, there's too many of them. B, there's not a lot of value to them. They're using probably something integrated in with whatever solution they're using for mailing, which is, again, not WordPress. It's probably like, MailChimp or Mooseend or one of the many, content, distributing platforms and stuff like that for doing that. But yeah, I think probably the most complex one I've run across so far is the calendar one, because there doesn't seem to be a true solution directly in Jekyll for that. So, I'm kind of looking at either third party or using Google Calendar for it.
So what about the theming thing? You said it's literally just creates a skeleton site. And obviously they have like a place where you can get themes. But one of the sort of nice things about WordPress, especially in its later iterations, is you get, access to templates that are, responsive and stuff like that, sort of right out of the box. And you don't really have to do much to make the site look good. So what do you think about transitioning to Jekyll and making your site actually look like something that's not just a boilerplate, Bootstrap theme?
Hey, there's nothing wrong with Bootstrap. I mean, I would almost argue that, those themes in WordPress that push you onto things like Elementor and stuff like that, they're basically pushing you onto other systems that you're going to have to buy more and more stuff for. So none of that's really friendly. And a lot of the themes themselves, unless you use the actual WordPress ones, the ones that like the default WordPress 2022, 2023, 2024, a lot of those will actually wipe out any of your customizations every time you do an upgrade. So they're not very friendly at all. And anybody who's managed a WordPress site that's using some kind of bullcrap third-party theme that decides to reset itself, knows this for a fact that you sort of hold your theme back until you feel like spending some time reapplying any customizations that you've done to the theme. And that's sort of what, when I went into this, I wanted to avoid, is that, the themes were there. There was plenty of themes out there. Maybe not something that uses Elementor or, think of like a Wix or something like that, where you can come in and use a little GUI designer and it actually pulls a cached page from a service and generates your content that way. That stuff doesn't actually use WordPress at all. So it's basically pulling from a third party. In theory, I think you can still do that with this. I wouldn't recommend it. I think keeping things a bit simple and using more modern CSS libraries, like a Tailwind and stuff like that. And then, maybe getting into an ecosystem of a third, maybe a third party. Someone has modified it even better, so the colors are better, and the wraps are better, and the borders look better, and everything else. You can get into some custom stuff, I think, pretty easily with a little bit of exploration. Again, I went with boot swatch. That was about the extent of the customization I was going to go with, is being able to, in one literal line, change the way the site looks instantaneously if I wanted to. So,
well, I tell you, it sounds interesting to me, and I mean, I don't know. We certainly don't know what's going to shake out from the WordPress problem or problem at this point. But I mean, it's always good to be looking at a new paradigm and a new way to go in case everything sort of goes crazy. I don't remember if there was any discussion about forking WordPress. I can't remember. Like all the licensing details and all of the shows I was listening to that were talking about WordPress, I don't recall if that was something that was an option that was looking at. I believe everyone was talking about going to to something non-WordPress. Even a fork wasn't really on the table. So,
yeah, because I think it's not necessarily specific to the code in WordPress. It's like sort of the domains and where, like, your default, even your self-hosted website goes for add-ons and plugins and stuff like that, could be co-opted because it's not in the same company as the one that did the software that you're running. So there's a distinct difference of perhaps a conflict of interest between all the parties.
Yeah, fair enough. I mean, and again, it's always good to be looking towards new technologies with an eye towards stuff. And especially if you have a site that is basically just static content anyway, you're obviously going to get way better performance out of, something like Jekyll over WordPress. Plus, you won't be encumbered by having to have a database backend and all the other crap that goes along with it. So you're definitely going to see a performance increase. And if you're, if they allow you to sort of, plug in a theme, like reference a theme, and that does, that does a lot of the styling and stuff like that. And then, of course, you can customize, your theme code and your static page code and stuff like that using Markdown. So it probably wouldn't be too difficult to jump into this and roll right along. It's only for people who are sort of deeply invested and have a lot of, third-party plugins and integrations and stuff like that. I can see where that would be a problem. But for simpler stuff, it's probably a straightforward and easy move.
Yeah. Well, a lot of our third-party things that we integrate with, let's say like MailChimp and stuff like that, a lot of those are all embed codes anyway. So it doesn't even matter what we're running. You can still embed and work with your third-party stuff. So all that stuff would still work in this case with a static site generator. It's not very specific to WordPress, besides the fact that, dealing with WordPress is a pain in the ass.
Oh, right. If you can use embed tags and like, what's the other one I'm thinking of? The iframes and stuff like that. Obviously that's pretty simple. Sometimes those don't render out as
iframes are
you would suspect, but
iframes are evil.
Absolutely. Well, this is cool though. And then of course there's Hugo, which is a project you mentioned sort of in passing, is another one that folks can look at if they want to try and move into static CSS based content producer instead of full blown WordPress.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah, I mean, Hugo worked fine too. I think I got caught up in the ecosystem of the themes, and I don't know. That might just be my initial hang up with anything, is that I started getting into the themes, and then I was like, now I'm doing a theme specific thing, and I really didn't want to do a theme specific thing. I wanted to just make my own, and if it sucked, it sucked. That was basically it. I wanted to know more of what my code was doing, not only just in the in the regular database space or the data file space, but I wanted to know what my code was doing in the rendering space as well, without a lot of kind of black box thing. You kind of think about like, I just send my page over there, and then something magical happens and it looks a certain way. I kind of wanted to know a little bit more about the rendering side, and that's kind of why I chose more of the vanilla route using Bootstrap and Bootswatch.
Yeah, you wanted to have more control over your configuration, not like in Soviet Russia theme programmed you.
Well, yeah, that's what it kind of feels like. It really feels like once you pick a theme, you're sort of stuck in how the author of the theme thought about putting it all together. So, yeah, I kind of, every time I kind of got into that, even with WordPress, I got into the same thing. I kind of like, oh, this is great. It looks great. Now when I start customizing it, it's like, well, this is not very great anymore, because now the customization doesn't work right. It takes a logo and it shrinks the logo, or it makes the logo look stupid, and I can't really control it because they didn't expose, in the theme editor, they didn't expose the stupid, size of, logos or something stupid like that. And then you have to like go into the custom side and edit the page. And then, you're doing a lot of manual stuff with those things to really get everything tweaked perfectly. And I was never, ever happy with the themes that I looked at, including, commercial themes and stuff like that. It always seemed like there was always something with all of them that had a problem. And then when I looked at these static site generators, again, I looked at themes because like, oh yeah, it has to look pretty and blah, blah. It was like instantaneously, smacked in the face. It was like, oh, this is not great. Why am I going down the same road with something different? Why don't I do something even more different? And I can still fix it pretty later because it's all the same thing. It's all div tags and boxes and stuff like that. And eventually you can, just change the way that looks too. Unless you're doing like absolute positions or relative positions, and you're doing something really super customizing where you're dragging and dropping stuff into a very specific location on the page. And, again, when it hits a web browser on a phone, it does look different anyway. Your absolute positions sort of break a little bit.
Yeah, it just reminds me of when I was working on the LHS site, having to use the Google Inspector and going into all the CSS code. I probably have 150 lines of custom CSS to make the LHS site look the way it does. But yeah, maybe someday in the far distant future, I'll look at converting that over to something like Jekyll. I'm definitely not doing it anytime soon.
Oh, no. Yeah. And then you have to be real careful, especially for like our site, the LHS podcast site, because we have an RSS feed in there. So you need to rebuild that RSS feed identically or everyone will receive 567 new episodes tomorrow.
Yeah, absolutely. The ones that depend on all the tags being the right thing. And if it detects any sort of anomaly, it'll be like, oh, these are all brand new. Ha!
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, we've been through that before. So,
but yeah, that's a real cool part, is that you can maintain a full RSS feed in there. You can change tags. You can add new tags. You can add a new format. Think about like the podcasting 2.0 stuff where they've added lots of different new tags and stuff like that for doing chapters and everything else. Our chapters would just have one that says stupid stuff. No, I'm just kidding. These dumb heads are talking about stuff. There would be stuff that you could add sort of dynamically, and it would be backwards compatible with everything in your site. And it's You could do this all with the static site generator as well. You don't need to have something like Blueberry or something like that, or whatever it's called. Is it Blueberry? I think it's called Blueberry.
Yep.
Yeah. So you wouldn't have that. You can have, your own thing, and maintain it all yourself, and have dynamic permalinks for the episodes and everything else, much like you would have for a blog. I don't know if this is a perfect solution. This has been around for a long time. It's sort of what I remember the GitHub pages when they first came out, when you could have your own little website at your github.io account. This is what I used. I don't even know if my GitHub.io page still shows up. I haven't played with that in forever. It was probably like version 1 or something like that, or maybe an earlier version of Jekyll. This has been around for quite a while. This is version 4.3.4. That's the most recent version. So it's quite mature, and there's a lot of people using it. So I would definitely, if you're interested in static site generator and you haven't settled on one yet, I would definitely look at Jekyll and have a good gander at the possibilities of what you can do.
Excellent. That sounds like a perfect place to leave it. So we'll leave it there. And with that, that's our topic for tonight. So let's move on to our next segment, which is announcements and feedback. I felt like there was more feedback that came in over the break, but I couldn't find it. So I'm going to have to go dig around. And if I do find any more, I will, of course, bring it up on the next program for sure. In the meantime, I have a feeling, I get the sense that no one actually listens to the outro of the show. So I want to throw out there before the show ends and before we get to the outro that if you want to help support the show, you can support us by signing up on Patreon or PayPal. Links are on the subscribe link on the website, lhspodcast.info. We do have merchandise. You can buy hats and shirts and jackets and hoodies and iPhone and Samsung covers and things like that. And we're looking at getting some different merch, maybe doing some challenge coins or pint glasses again or something along those lines. We haven't sort of fleshed that out, but there will be stuff available, certainly before Handvention rolls around, because all the stuff we used to have we're out of, I think, except for stickers. So all that stuff's available. Please buy some merch. It does help out the show. Links, of course, are on the show website as well. And I think that's all I had to say about that. And then we did get one YouTube comment from Baton IARZ. Batoniars? Sure, why not? He says CS 7000 radios began shipping back in June or July. If I remember correctly, someone dug up old news and posted it. This was a response to when we were talking about M17 hardware coming out back in episode 550, I believe. So if you happen to catch 550 on YouTube, you saw this comment, but it was about the CS 7000 M17 capable radio being available. And of course they are available. And then I saw this new thing where they're using M17 to text on old Nokia phones. Craziness. Because that's the thing people want to do. Well, anyway, that's all we had that I could find. If I dig up more, I will certainly bring them up on episode number 568. And before we get out of here, we'll go ahead and let you all know who joined us over the break on social medias and new subscribers. We did have a couple, Kevin Long and Paul Kongstad. Thanks very much for becoming patrons of the program. Huh?
I just said thank you. Yeah.
Oh, thank you. Yes. I will second the thank you and third it and fourth it. And then for social medias, we had free Patreon subscribers, David Moe, Colin, and Bill W3FRB. On Facebook, Billy Joel. It was like some seven name thing, so I just said Billy Joe. No one on Twitter or X. I think we may just get off of X at some point here pretty quick, but whatever.
I've never seen any problems with X myself, but I really don't use it.
No, I don't either. And
I mean, my feed, besides the ads, it looks the same as it always has, just a bunch of ham radio guys talking about ham radio stuff.
The only thing I do with it is post the shows. So
yeah, there's nothing wrong with that.
Then on YouTube, we had Keith Carrickner Jr., Corey, and one XWS, and Bentley Sorsdahl. On Discord, we had K6BRW, Dick KF6UX. That's a careful one. Got to say that careful. Red's Dead 78, F1RAD, Starbuck G, Oshia, Ramed, ON5 Bernarkin, William K6WHM, Kunal Gautam, Kafka AFK, or Kafka FK, something like that. Steph VK5IE, KI5KLF Fernando, Linux Wiz. We should have him on the show. He can talk about all the stuff we don't know about.
Apparently.
KG4BHR Sean. On Instagram, we had Alfonso Del Rio, Mastodon BC Guy, Adam KC3AN, Evan NR8E, and Ken Sept. On Blue Sky, KF6EFG, F4FLO, VY2HF, Patrick Truchon, Jay Rulo, hi Jonas, A1 Doll, and Clublog. It's not Clublog itself, it's the author.
Cool.
No merch sales on the mailing list. We had Ray McGavran join up. And tonight in the live chat, we had Mike K6GTE, Tony K4XSS, and Jill K1TTZ join us for the live show. So thanks, everybody, for being here. Thanks for tuning in for this first episode of 2025. We really appreciate you being here. And as always, we really appreciate those who help support the show financially, keep the lights on. We are looking forward to Hamvention. It's a mere 5 months away. So it feels like it's almost here. And with that, I guess we'll go ahead and get on out of here. Thanks all for listening. Have a great week. We hope you'll tune in to episode number 568 when it runs around. And until then, we're going to get on out of here. And for the on assignment, Cheryl W5MOO, I'm Ross K5TUX.
And I'm Bill NE4RD 73.
Thank you for listening to this episode of Linux in the Ham Shack. LHS is a community-sponsored podcast. Live recordings are Sunday nights at 8 o'clock Central Time. Our homepage can be found at lhspodcast.info. You can support the podcast via Patreon at patreon.com/LHS podcast. We're also on Discord, Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, and Mastodon. Contact us via email at info@lhspodcast.info or via voicemail at 190954777469. That's 1909 LHS show. We also have merch. So until next we meet, remember to always heed your hedonism.